Hello, hi, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Mel and I like books. If you're even vaguely adjacent to the fantasy space, you've heard of Brandon Sanderson. If you're online a lot, maybe you've seen his free lecture series on how to write fantasy and sci-fi. Or maybe you've seen an extensive breakdown of his Marvel-like cinematic universe called The Cosmere. Or if you're like me, you saw this video.
I have been lying to you. Because I accidentally wrote an extra novel, in secret. And I might have gone a little overboard, because I've written 5 extra novels in the last 2 years.
So I want to get in on the fun, because people who love Sanderson, and I want to know why. Brandon Sanderson has sold over 40 million copies of his books, of which he has like 72. 72? He has multiple series, which you might have heard of: the Stormlight Archive, Mistborn Saga, Skyward. He finished Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. He has standalone novels. If you like Sanderson, there is no shortage of Sanderson material out there. From what I understand, they're big, sprawling, interconnected worlds, which can be really intimidating, and I think is a little bit intimidating, but I think that's what fosters the community that I see online, is looking for Easter eggs, breaking things down, developing love for characters that appear as cameos in later books. It's like being a Taylor Swift fan, which, I can relate to that. He also has a convention where people can actually show up and meet him and get books signed and meet friends that they've made in this community, which I think brings us to the first point of why he is so popular, which is his community engagement and his transparency. Every author nowadays has an Instagram, but the way that Brandon Sanderson uses his platforms to connect to his fans and market his work reminds me a lot of like Taylor Swift circa 2006. Yes, that's already 2 Taylor Swift references in this video. I am not sorry. He has one of the biggest book-related YouTube channels on the platform. He has over 480,000 subscribers. He posts consistently every single week, multiple times a week. One of them is a podcast with his friend Dan. The other is a weekly update where he posts percentages of how much he has achieved on the books he's actively working on. And, that is unheard of for so many reasons, because updating so regularly puts a lot of pressure on him and his writing and his books. Like, can you imagine if for 5 weeks in a row the update was like, yeah, I just wasn't feeling it, eh? Like, haven't done anything, like 0%. People would be like, boo, rich author never does anything. And for some people, their creative process isn't just sitting down for certain hours of the day, like banging out their work. They have to be creatively inspired and can take them a long time to write a book. But from my research, Brandon has been pretty open about how he structures his writing and how he treats it like, a 9-to-5 job, albeit in the middle of the night, not from 9 to 5.
What I do in my life is I do 2 writing sessions. I usually get up at noon or 1 and write from 1 until 5. 4-hour chunk. At 5, I stop, and 5 until 10 is family time for me. And then I go back to work at 10 after everybody goes to bed, theoretically, and I write from 10 until 2. And then 2 until 4 is goof off time for me. Video game, reading a book, listening to a podcast, whatever it is I feel like doing.
And so in a world where, hypothetically, an entire TV adaptation can be started and completed before the next book in the series is written, the transparency can be pretty refreshing. Some people don't want to commit to a huge series without knowing that it's actually going to be completed in their lifetime. Consistency is something that I saw brought up a lot in defense of Sanderson on forums and in videos. And if he's your favorite author, you're getting a book from him every 6 months. And just from a marketing perspective alone, like that's somebody talking about you and your books every 6 months, keeping you, in the zeitgeist and keeping you at the front of the bookshelves in bookstores and libraries, and so also creates this cyclical benefit for him. He also collaborates with other creators who enjoy his works, boosting their channels so that they get more viewers. So when his next book comes out and they're probably going to read it and they're probably going to talk about it, he gets more exposure, and overall it just, again, it's another positive feedback loop for the whole community, in that Brandon Sanderson himself is on YouTube, so I'm going to watch him. He's my favorite author. Oh, he was also on this booktube channel. Oh, now I like this booktube channel. Oh, and now they're talking about his next book, so it all just feeds back into each other. And BookTok and BookTube are some of the most powerful marketing tools in publishing right now. So for him to not only be part of that, but contributing to the creation of content around that is just, you know, really legitimizes it for everybody. As well as collaborations, he also does pretty consistent Q&As on his YouTube channel and on his Reddit forum. He used to be pretty active over there by the looks of things. I don't know if he is anymore, but he takes questions from his community and he'll answer them, some of them book related, some of them just, you know, related to him as a person, what games he's playing, what other media he's consuming. So, you know, he really is putting in the hard yards for that community engagement. And I guess the biggest example of that is he has his own convention. That is community engagement beyond the internet. And, you know, I saw people say, I've met so many friends because of the Cosme community. I think that's really special and not something that all authors are able to do. The second thing that I found is he's a personality. He's a showman. He likes being a little bit dramatic, and some people find that really corny, but some people really love it. You know, one example is the way that he launched his recent secret projects. Like, the video was very out there, very dramatic. You know, he's nerdy, he's a little bit weird, he likes collecting swords, he likes talking about the media that he enjoys, he's endearing. You know, the type of person to read his books can relate to him because he is the target audience for his books. He is also a fantasy fan. And for me, when I was researching this video, he does seem like he's genuinely very passionate about writing stories and building worlds, and I think people can see when somebody is genuine. A lot of people connect to that, and people say, he's just a nice guy. He seems like such a nice guy. That's a comment that came up a lot when I was trolling through forums. Which brings me on to my next point, which he is using his powers for good. Yes, he is one of the biggest selling authors right now. And, you know, there are thousands of authors, but it is a very, very small percentage who are doing numbers like Brandon Sanderson. So he holds a lot of sway in the publishing industry. And, you know, he has every right to be like, I've worked hard, I've got to this point, and that's that, I'm reaping the rewards. But he's been very vocal about changes that he'd like to see. In particular, I'll link to the video up here, he talks about Audible and the monopoly they currently have on audiobooks and the absolutely shonky deal that they're giving authors at the moment. But essentially, they can do whatever they want because the vast majority of audiobook listeners use Audible. And so he made a video about it, and all of his secret projects, his most recent works, have not been on Audible. Not only that, but the platforms that he is going with for these projects, which I think were Spotify and something else, they offered deals that they just couldn't offer to other authors. So, you know, he negotiated a deal that would be reasonable and that those platforms could offer to other authors, you know, and he's been very vocal about how the industry should move towards ebook bundling, which is something that, you know, he's done with the works that he's published independently. He's very passionate about access to information, and he has his lecture series. He talks extensively about his writing process and gives advice on his writing process, and, you know, has heaps of videos about the publishing industry. His recent secret projects were published via a Kickstarter campaign, which, you know, made something like $42 million, was the biggest Kickstarter in history. You know, he really is shaking up publishing and thinking about new ways that things can be approached. Not to say that every author has that sort of power to launch a Kickstarter, but it's really making people, you know, sit up and listen. And using his powers for good is something that his audience seems to really appreciate. You know, it's funny that we've gotten to this point and not talked about the actual stories themselves, but people like his books. Murphy did a really great video on breaking down what people like and dislike about Sanderson. I really recommend you go watch that because, as I said, I've never actually read a Brandon Sanderson novel before. But from what I understand, there are three main things that people like about his writing. His world building. He has really unique and fun worlds that are very deep and, I suppose, hard magic systems. He has characters that people really love and really relate to. I've heard his writing is very accessible. It's not overly flowery. It's not overly metaphorical. Somebody said that reading his writing is like watching a movie or watching a TV show, which some people really love, but some people really do not. Which brings me to why people don't like Sanderson, which is almost exactly the same reason why people do like Sanderson. So I guess that's why personal taste exists. Criticisms I often saw were that his world building is too rulesy, like too specific. I want to live in my fantasy magical world and I don't want to be bogged down in all these rules. And I guess that comes with the territory of like hard versus soft magic systems. And he has hard magic systems. Some people don't like the way he builds his characters. Some people said they can be very one note. Again, I don't know. I'd love to hear your opinion on that. But by far the thing that comes up when you read a Brandon Sanderson is overrated, why does everybody like Brandon Sanderson thread on, Reddit or YouTube comments, is his writing style. People do not like his writing style. As I said, it's very accessible, but that also means it's very simple. And I found an article on Brandon's website where he talks about that he wants his prose to be invisible prose, which sent me down a whole other rabbit hole of essentially his writing wants to deliver you the story, like looking through a window where you don't actually notice the window, it just is something that enables you to look outside, as opposed to a stained glass window, which you can still see outside, but the stained glass window itself is beautiful and intricate and, metaphorical and flowery. So it is intentional that he writes that way, but there are a lot of people who do not connect with his writing style at all. So I'll be really interested to see if I connect with it, because I think I like pretty flowery language. Like, I really enjoy lyrical writing, I suppose you call it, but I don't know if that's something that I want in my fantasy. I guess I read different genres for that. So I don't know. Let me know what you think. Are you a lover or a hater of the Brandon Sanderson prose? Let me know. Another reason people don't like him is they just have Brandon Sanderson fatigue. Like, he's very popular, so he is everywhere. So his fans will often talk about his work to people who may not even necessarily be the audience that needs it. I think with any sort of overly popular franchise, people get tired of it. I mean, in the height of Twilight and Harry Potter, it was the same thing. It would be remiss of me to talk about why people don't like Brandon Sanderson without actually talking about one of the most serious issues people have, which is his Mormonism. He is very vocal about his faith and how important that is in his life, and that faith has not always been kind to minorities. He wrote an article on his blog that is often resurfaced. I think it was 2007 when J.K. Rowling came out saying that Dumbledore is gay. Oh my god, was that 2007? I'm so old. And in this blog post, he says some not great things about gay marriage and gay people. I'll just read it for you. Another note to those who might be reading this who are themselves gay. No, I don't believe that homosexuality can, in many cases at least, be treated and cured. I do believe, however, that impulses of attraction between people of the same gender are something that can and should be resisted, in the same way that my impulses of attraction toward women, who are not my wife, can and should be resisted. You probably believe differently. I'm okay with that. End note. But that was 16 years ago, and he hasn't tried to hide that that is something that he has said. But it seems like that he has changed his tune a lot in the past 16 years. This is another article from his website. I really encourage you to go and read it if this is something that really bothers you about Brandon Sanderson. I will just read an excerpt, but I'll link it in the description. There are certainly some wrong-headed ideas presented in the article, though if you haven't read it and instead have only read excerpts, you might want to read the actual thing. I think some of the content will surprise you, as it was the writings of a man trying, poorly, to learn how to be supportive of LGBTQ+ ideas, even while not being willing to fully commit. Back in 2007, I was mostly known only in my community, not to the world at large. The essay then was directed at my local community and was more controversial among them for being too liberal than it was controversial to the world at large for being homophobic. This was mostly me trying to encourage other members of the church to be more open and welcoming of gay characters and ideas. That said, the essay does display the casual bigotry common to people who, like myself, have lived lives where we haven't had to deal with some of the issues common to the lives of people suffering discriminations. Many of the assertions, such as my view on gay marriage, does not reflect my current stance. After writing it and interacting with those who found it objectionable, even painful, I came to understand them and their experience better. They did not owe me that honor, they gave it freely. For that reason, I don't regret writing the essay. The alternative would have been to remain quiet and therefore never learn. I appreciate greatly those who are willing to talk rather than yell, those who encourage rather than despise. I hope that I am able to learn from their examples and show similar understanding. In return, I'd like to be very clear. I apologize deeply for the pain I brought you, for both my unaware bigotry and the bad decisions I made with eyes wide open. I'm trying to do better. So just from that, you think, wow, like this is what people want, right? We want people to learn and grow and accept people for who they are, despite how they might have felt previously. And it seems like that's the general vibe that I get from people is, that he has grown and he isn't ignoring that he used to make comments like this, and he does have actively LGBTQ plus characters in his books. So some people are okay with where he stands right now, but there are some people who still aren't okay with the fact that he is Mormon, because as part of Mormonism, they have to pay their tithing, which is a percentage of their income that goes to the church, which the church then spends on church things. And Brandon Sanderson has a very large income, so presumably he is paying a very large tithing to the church. And despite that Brandon has his own much more liberal views than the Mormon Church is actively funding anti-LGBTQ plus activities, and people just don't like that supporting him and his books is indirectly supporting the Mormon Church, which is causing a lot of damage to the LGBTQ plus community. And I think that is something that you have to grapple with yourself, whether you think that it is enough to have a personal conviction that goes against your own religion. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this. Brandon Sanderson has said that his faith is something that is really important to him, and he believes that he can make a greater difference by being inside the church and educating people with his perspective of, I guess, bring some of these more liberal ideas to a very conservative religion. But with all that aside, will I actually like his stories? I've been really intrigued by his first secret project. It's called Tress of the Emerald Sea. So that's what I'm going for. Apparently it's a standalone, somewhat linked to the Cosmere, but that I don't need any prior experience to read it. So that's what I'm starting with. Wish me luck.
In the middle of the ocean, there was a girl who lived upon a rock. This was not an ocean like the one you have imagined, nor was the rock like one you have imagined. The girl, however, might be as you imagined, assuming you imagined her as thoughtful, soft-spoken, and overly fond of collecting cups. Men often describe the girl as having the hair the color of wheat. Others would call it the color of flax, or occasionally the color of honey. The girl wondered why men so often used food to describe women's features. There seemed to be a hunger to such men that was best avoided. In the evenings, Tress would often sit on her porch and sip salty tea from one of her favorite cups while looking out over the deep green ocean. As the sun set, she'd wonder about the people who visited the rock in their ships. And yes, I did say the ocean was green. Also, it was not wet. We're getting to that.
I really enjoyed this, guys. I thought that the characters were so well done. I could really picture the world. Like, the world building was really strong. It's told by this particular character as if he's telling you it sitting around the fire, and it really had that campfire feel where he's talking to you, and his narrative voice was so strong. Like, he was a bit snarky of like, stop interrupting me, and I just thought it was so well done, and I had such a good time with it. What is it about? It is about Tress, who lives on an island in the middle of the sea, but the sea is made of spores and not water, and the spores are very dangerous, so nobody ever leaves the island. But because of reasons, she needs to leave the island to go and rescue her friend, and she doesn't want to do that. She's perfectly happy with her life on the island, her quiet little life, but she loves her friend, so she's going to go on this adventure, and it's really great to see her character kind of evolve over the journey. It never feels forced and like she's doing things that are out of character. It all feels like, oh yeah, this is what Tress would do in this situation. There are some really like larger than life, sort of characters in the book. It is a pirate story, which is really fun. I've never actually read a pirate story before. So yeah, I just really had such a good time with this book. I can't stop thinking about it. I want to read it again, which is really unusual for me. So yeah, I gave this 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that his other books are like this, because if they are, then I'm definitely going to pick them up. Let me know if you've read Tress. Is this like his other books? Is this writing style similar? What other books should I pick up from Brandon? And what did you think of it? Like, have you read Tress? Have you read the other secret projects? Let me know what you think. I'd love to have a conversation with you about it. And let me know if you learned something about Brandon Sanderson in this video. I had a really fun time putting it together, and I am really excited to hear some of the conversations.